Today on this episode of The Brain Surgeon's Take, we will be discussing Extreme is Nothing with professional Ironman triathlete and medical student at The Ohio State University, Matthew Marquardt. Hear about this legendary individual and how he is not only striving to become one of the greatest endurance athletes on the planet, but also aiming to change the face of cancer as a physician and scientist. Much more on this podcast episode. Welcome back, everyone. Here's my take on Matthew Marquardt. He is an extraordinary individual who redefines what is possible. Professional triathlete, full-time medical student, and living proof that impossible is nothing. While most of us struggle to balance work and life, Matthew is training at an elite level, competing with the world's best in triathlon, while studying medicine, one of the most demanding academic paths there is. From early morning swim sets to late night study sessions, Matthew's journey is one of relentless discipline, laser focus, and a mindset that does not accept limits. Whether he's crossing the finish line in Kona or pushing through clinical rotations, he's constantly testing the boundaries of human potential. In a world that loves to say, you can't do both, Matthew is doing just that and doing it exceptionally well. Today in this podcast, we talk about endurance, not just in sport, but in life. We explore what drives him, how he manages the grind, and what it means to chase excellence in two fields that demand everything. This is more than a story about sports or medicine. It's about mindset, mission, and grit. Let's dive in. Listen up as we discuss Extreme is Nothing, pro triathlete and medical student. Check it out. Hey, Matthew, how's it going?
Pretty good. How are you?
I'm good. Listen, very excited to have you on the podcast. As I told you before we started recording, you're one of the few people on this planet, I think, that make me feel lazy. And as a medical student and a professional triathlete, unbelievable discipline, grind, motivation, focus. And I hope some of that translates here in the podcast and look forward to talking to you.
Yeah, for sure. It's great to talk to someone else who is also in healthcare and talk a lot on the triathlon side. Obviously, in terms of other podcasts, but I think you'll provide like some pretty different and interesting questions and perspectives that looking forward to.
Absolutely, man. I mean, let's start with your mindset and your motivation, which I believe is 99% of the battle here. But when did you realize that you wanted to be both a physician and a professional triathlete?
During med school. So I swam in college, and my senior year I graduated in 2021, and so my senior year was canceled, swim season, and that was the first time in my life where I had this void where I all of a sudden had like an extra 20 to 30 hours of time in my week, and I just couldn't have it. So I signed up for a half Ironman, and actually long story short, the race ended up being moved to the day before my graduation. And so I did a half Ironman, immediately got in the car, and then flew to New Jersey, got in at midnight, and graduated the next morning. um, but at the time, that was supposed to be one and done, and like I was only going to do that one race, and then I qualified for the World Championships as an age grouper, and so I was like, okay, like I'll do it was 6 weeks into med school. I was like, I can sacrifice training in med school for 6 weeks and like, then I'll just be a med student. Because like no one can do this. No one can like train for an Ironman and do med school. And then I did really well in World Championships. I got second in my age group. And at that point, there wasn't necessarily like a super clear shot like indicator that I was going to be the pro that I am today. But there was enough of a sliver of hope that kind of caused me to really think of like, okay, do I want to just take the traditional med school route and just spend all my time on research and, kind of all those other extracurriculars that med students do? Or do I want to devote myself to triathlon and kind of take a little bit of a gamble? And see kind of what happens. And so after talking to a bunch of people, I'm sure you're familiar, like one of the biggest indicators of future success in medicine is if you're elite in something else. And so they're like, yes, you're already a Division 1 athlete, but like, if you can prove that you can do triathlon at med school, that will open up a lot of doors too. And I was like, okay, like I think this is worth the risk. It's something I enjoy doing and could potentially be very valuable. And so that's kind of when I really started to lean into it, and it's just been a really fun journey ever since. And never expected to get where I am, and but certainly requires a lot of discipline. And I think the best way to think about it is kind of you put rocks in a vase in it analogy, where like you have to put the big rocks in first and then you can put the smaller things in order to maximize the space. And that's kind of how I go about my life. And that like my two big priorities are like training, obviously, because you can't push a workout to tomorrow. Like you have to get the workout done today. And then obviously med school too. And then also kind of my relationships. So those are the three kind of biggest things. And then the other stuff I fit in as much as I can. And um, I've gotten really good at training at kind of odd hours. So like especially I started clinical rotations in January, and that meant getting up somewhere between 3:30 and 4:30 to do my first workout most days, and then would do the second workout somewhere between like 4 and 6, or like I would start the second workout somewhere between 4 and 6, and between 6 and 8 most nights. And I think the really interesting thing is that when you fully buy into something, it just becomes something you do. And I'm sure as a surgeon, maybe you weren't necessarily always like used to getting up at 4 or 5 in the morning, but now it's just like, oh, you're like, that's when I get up. No big deal. And I kind of feel like that's where things have become with triathlon and training in med school. It's like, this is just something that I do, and this is the quote unquote normal.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. It sounds like you're preaching to the choir. I mean, that's exactly the way I view the schedule, the discipline, the focus, and the inability to push things off, right? Like it's very easy to make excuses. Oh, I can't do it today. But to be at the level that you're at in two very demanding fields requires the ability to never make an excuse and never put things off. And that's so to me, I think that's one of the biggest take home points. What about, I think the question that everyone would wonder when they're listening to this, but what fuels your drive when when your body and your mind are completely exhausted? We've been there, we've all been there. You wake up, you feel like you're getting stabbed in the eye, you're exhausted, it's been a long day, either on your clinical clerkships or you're studying for tests, or vice versa, and you need a workout or you need to study. What fuels you to push through?
Yeah, so I think it's twofold, and they're both very related. Like the biggest one is kind of my kind of larger goal, larger purpose within triathlon is to honor those in my life who have had cancer and who have cancer, and then also to raise awareness about the importance of cancer research and all the incredible innovations that are happening in cancer right now. And so that's kind of like my overarching larger goal. And but really the value behind that is a commitment. And that I made a commitment to myself, I made a commitment to my sponsors, I made a commitment to kind of those people in my life who have had cancer, that this is something that I'm going to see through. And so that's really when there's the days where I'm like, oh, I don't really want to do it. Like those are the things that I think really push me through more than anything else, is just kind of this commitment that I've made to so many people directly and indirectly.
Speaking to that, I think another question that I know the answer to, but I want to hear you say it: physical versus mental importance in doing what you're doing. Physical stamina versus mental stamina. What's more important, and what do you think is more impactful in your success?
Really great question, because obviously there is an important physical foundation that you need to have in order to do an Ironman and to do the training. But I think a lot of research increasingly is showing that in the world of endurance sports in particular, the mental side is actually the most important. And really, the difference between first, second, and third sometimes truly is just like who can like dig a little deeper and push through the pain a little bit more. And so the mental side is super, super important, especially for an Ironman. Like I have to be careful a little bit that I don't do too much during a race week, because you don't want to go into a race being mentally drained, because then that just makes everything that much harder, for sure.
You alluded to it a little bit prior, but I want to get into details. Give us your normal day. When you wake up, when you work out, when you study, when you eat, when you go to sleep, all of that?
Yeah, so I'd say like kind of being on clinical rotations, the schedule was wake up somewhere between 3:30 and 4:30. I would do 1 to 2 workouts, depending on the day. Be off to the hospital by 6:30. Kind of be in my seat by 7, and then you do rounds in the morning. So like you would pre-round and then do rounds. Kind of have lunch around noonish, which is often a lecture because every minute is taken advantage of in medicine. So and then in the afternoon, you're kind of checking in on patients and whatnot. And depending on when the residents let us go, that can be like 3 to 6 p.m. Come home, do another workout, um, which could be another 1 to 2 hours working out. And then dinner and kind of some emails maybe, or maybe there's a little bit of writing I need to do or something, and then get to bed as soon as I can. So and then kind of throughout the whole day, there's always little moments where you can kind of fit in a little bit of studying. And so that's like one of the biggest ways that I do it is I take advantage of my weekends. And we have Tuesday afternoon kind of as a dedicated time. We have like some lectures sometimes, but you have a little bit more free time there as well. And so, yeah, it's like, taking advantage of those 5 to 10 minute gaps in your day is definitely really important.
How do you prevent burnout with two such strenuous and demanding goals that you're pursuing simultaneously?
Yeah, so honestly, as crazy as it sounds, I think that having these two separate goals has actually helped mitigate burnout. It certainly hasn't like completely reduced it. There are periods of time where things are a little bit harder, but then things get a little bit easier, and you're able to kind of recover and move forward. But I think that compared to my classmates, actually having these two different things, even though they're both very demanding, has actually been beneficial because when I'm training, I'm focused on triathlon, and when I'm doing, studying or in hospital, I'm doing medicine, and so you know, you can kind of recover. You kind of almost have two halves of your identity, and you can recover on the other half when you're doing the other one. So I actually think that it's been really beneficial in that aspect. And each pursuit also provides different perspective, which I think is really valuable. Like, let's just take triathlon. You're on the starting line of the world championships, and you're like, oh my gosh, like I'm so nervous, I'm stressed out, like there's so much at stake. But then you're like, oh wait, like no, like this isn't someone having like a brain tumor removed or like a mandible tumor removed. Like hopefully no one's gonna die in this race. And like, everyone at the end of the day, in the big picture, everyone's gonna be okay. So, and then kind of vice versa, like in medicine, you can get really stressed out about an exam or whatnot. And it's like, well, like I've been here before, I've been on bigger stages. So like there's definitely kind of some interplay between the two that I think is beneficial.
What an interesting way to look at it. They're both so demanding, but in their own way, they provide a little bit of a break from the other stressor. That's interesting. You talked about doing triathlons and being nervous before the race and the kind of
Mhm.
anticipation. Which discipline in the triathlon do you find most mentally challenging?
Um, Great question. I think the run for sure. Because at that point you're probably 5 to 6 hours into a race. You're physically starting to feel it. And at the end of the day, even the best in the world, the last hour or so of the marathon is like going to be painful and you have to dig. And so from a mental standpoint, that's the hardest, especially like let's take Ironman Texas from last year. I was leading the race for about 7 hours, um, but I hadn't really done appropriate heat preparation. And so, with hindsight, I cooked myself. Like my core temperature was too high, and you just start kind of shutting down. And so that just like when that happens mentally, you just fall apart. And it's really challenging. Like it was really interesting. That race goes around the lake, and there is nothing more that I wanted to do than just to jump in the lake because I was so hot. Um, and so, but yeah, the run is definitely the hardest. And because you've already put yourself through so much, but you need to do so much more at the same time.
I would love to get inside your mindset in those moments where you feel like there's no way out and you need to get through it. And I think
Mhm.
that's something you can, I think most people are just born with that. I'm sure you could teach that grit, but at your level, it's just exceptional because we all feel like we've hit the wall at some point doing whatever we're doing, and you've got to push through it because that wall is just imaginary and it's really set by your own mind. Along those lines, how has your athletic mindset and your background doing swimming and triathlons changed your approach to studying medicine?
Yeah, for sure. Um, so for your first one, I think the biggest thing is like, breaking a problem down into its pieces. Because in the moment something can feel super super big, but if you just focus on one thing at a time, like what is the next thing that needs to get done, and then you focus on the next thing and the next thing, obviously moving in the right direction, you have to have a general sense of where you want to go, and what you want to do. But as long as you focus on one thing at a time and break it down into smaller pieces, that's, I think, what I find to be the most beneficial. And obviously trying to control the emotions as best you can and stay rational during that, and like calm and rational, I think, are the key things, because as soon as you let kind of the emotions overflow, then that's when you can really start to get in trouble. So and then in terms of, sorry, what was the other question?
Well, just kind of lessons learned, meaning like
Yeah.
these two fields seem so different. And how does medicine help you in triathlons? And what have you learned from triathlons that affect your medicine?
Yeah, I think so. The two main lessons I've learned are kind of the importance of consistency. So you don't become a pro triathlete overnight. There's not one workout that makes you great. It's the work that you put in day after day after day that layers on top of each other. And that's really what creates excellence. And I view the same thing as medicine. Like, it's not one major study session that's going to teach you all the information. You have to layer it over time, revisit it. Um, and then also the other thing is that things don't have to go perfect to still have a really good result. And I think that's one of the biggest lessons that I've had from the past 6 months. And that, the first 2 years of medical school at Ohio State are lecture based. And so you have a lot of flexibility and autonomy with your time. But once you get into the hospital, you lose that autonomy. And so there are a lot of things over the past 6 months in particular that I was doing very wrong in terms of an athletic performance standpoint. I was on my feet for large parts of the day, wasn't necessarily getting the recommended amount of sleep, et cetera, et cetera. But I was controlling the things that I could control, and still being very intentional about what I was doing. And I put together some of the best training that I've ever done. And obviously that led to my first win about 2 weeks ago. So just because things weren't necessarily like perfect on paper doesn't mean that you can't put together a good result. And I think there's a lot of truth to that in medicine too, and that like stuff is going to go wrong when you're taking care of a patient, or kind of as you're going through residency or medical school. And it's about like how you adapt and how you use what you have at your disposal in that situation, and you can still come out with a good result.
You know, have you ever had to choose between an academic endeavor and a athletic event, one where you really had to pick one over the other? And along those lines, how have your professors and colleagues dealt with you being such a high level athlete and having this other demand that is equally important?
Yeah, so thankfully so far I haven't had to miss anything like super, super significant on one side or the other, but there's lots of like small things, small decisions that happen all the time of like, oh, maybe this race isn't a world championship race, but like I could do this race, but like I have this going on, so that's probably not the best. Um, and so there's lots of little decisions I think that happen that have just become little compromises, if you will, that have become such an inherent part of how I think about things that um, I don't really notice it that much anymore. Um, and then in terms of like how everyone else has treated me, it's been, OSU has been incredibly supportive, and I give them huge, huge kudos. Like I don't get any they don't cut me any breaks. Like I still have to do the same amount of work and everything, obviously, but they've been really flexible in kind of helping me craft some of the research time that I've taken in terms of when I take it, and some flexibility in terms of like, okay, you can do this race, but you're going to have to make it up at this time. And so I give them huge, huge credit for that, because certainly I couldn't do like what I'm going to do, and I'm happy to miss like winter break if it means that I can go to a world championship race. Um, so yeah, and it's it's also been interesting because, as I said, when I started medical school, um, I started triathlon basically. Like I basically started them at the same time, and so it's not like I came in this big hotshot triathlete. It's been something that like we've almost all grown together with, and so honestly, I think that's the best way to do it, if you can choose.
I mean, you've clearly sacrificed a lot. And I tell everyone that to become the best at what you do, and you're trying to become the best at two different things, you have to sacrifice. It's not like you can
Mhm.
have your cake and then eat it too. So, talking about balance and lifestyle, what is something that you've had to sacrifice in order to achieve greatness in these two fields?
Yeah, so I mean the simplest one is I like don't watch any TV. Like very, very little TV. I'm on social media, but I try and pretty much only use social media to like for my own content. Because you can just get sucked into that so easily. And obviously there have been a lot of social situations where I've had to say no. There have like been weddings that I couldn't go to because of a race or because of medical school, and obviously, like that stinks, but you have to make choices at the end of the day, and exactly you can't have it all. I like to try and do as much as I can, and I think I drive some people in my life a little crazy about how I try and fit so many different things in, um, but yeah, you certainly have to make sacrifices, and I think the biggest one comes from like the more traditional social stuff. I would much rather have dinner with someone or go get coffee with someone than go out to a party, and stay out late and then spend 6 hours kind of out on the town. I'd rather do like 1 or 2 hours, have a really nice coffee or dinner with someone, and just have that really quality experience rather than kind of like this longer drawn out experience. So there's ways you can kind of not to try and like make everything an optimization problem, but um, those are kind of some of the things that you have to think about sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, there's only 24 hours in a day. And so at the end of the day, I always tell people the most valuable commodity that we have is time.
Hmm.
It is just at the end of the day, we're all limited by time and you can only do so much. And how you use your time is incredibly efficient. Obviously, listening to your regular workday and having that discipline. Do you ever feel pressure to slow down or take a more quote unquote normal path? Just be a medical student, just be a triathlete. Does that cross your mind?
Oh, for sure. I mean, my significant other and I talk about it, every now and again, because there's this, I guess, paradox where, when you're in it, like when you're in this, you want, let's say like I'm looking outside for myself. I want what I have right now, but then also at the same time when you're actually in it, you're like, "Oh, there's a lot of downsides to this. Maybe I want the other thing. Maybe I want to just be normal, like because I'd have so much more time to do X, Y, and Z." But at the end of the day, I think you have to think about like, okay, what brings me the most like happiness and fulfillment and sense of purpose. And right now, that is what I'm doing. And certainly there's going to come a day where I can't do triathlon to the same extent that I can, but you know, I can do it to the extent that I can right now. And so I think there's a lot of value in taking advantage of that. And like knowing that there will be moments where that's not there. Um, so yeah, I mean, it's certainly hard, and it's certainly there are times where I'd be like, oh, like I'd rather take the easier route. But at the end of the day, I also recognize that there are lots and lots of people that would love to be in the position I'm in. So I'm also grateful for the position that I'm in. Um, yeah.
That's a great way to look at it. People always say pressure is a privilege. If you're under
Hmm.
pressure, it means that you're in a situation that's important. And
Exactly.
very few of us get to be in a situation of importance on a daily basis. And you get to do that. And you really live the motto of pressure is a privilege. And I think being grateful to have that opportunity. Because if you weren't under pressure and you didn't have that level of significance, I think you'd be bored. Just
Yeah.
listening to you speak, I'm pretty sure that's what would happen. But I want to get into your mindset. We talked a little bit about pushing through, going through that wall, and everyone has a different level of grit and resiliency, but you obviously have next level grit. What happens when you hit the wall, either studying or in a triathlon? Like you said, you're overheated, you want to jump in that lake in the middle
Mhm.
of the race. How do you push through? What do you tell yourself? And what takes you to the next level in those difficult situations?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different strategies that you can use, and I think the simplest by far, even though it sounds cheesy, has is self-talk. And so, like in a situation, there have been studies that have shown like if you're doing a heat training session, you can push yourself further to exhaustion just by saying like I am strong, I can do this in your head. And it's really fascinating. Like it's not like this fluffy stuff. It's like it's been really good studies that I've read about. And so there was one race in Lake Placid where I was developing like a really bad blister on my foot. And basically what I just kept telling myself is that I feel no pain. I feel no pain. I feel no pain. And that was able to distract me enough that like I didn't necessarily feel pain until the end of the race, and then it was really bad. But I didn't get injured. It was just soft tissue. um, but like self-talk I think can go really far, and then also just focusing on the task at hand, like it's one step. You run a marathon one step at a time, and so focus on one aid station at a time. Like I just need to get to the next aid station or the next aid station. And then also the other thing that really pushes me not to give up is triathlon is this very unique sport in that the age groupers, the amateurs, race on the same day and on the same course as the pros. And so I am sharing the course with age groupers, and they all have different goals, but a lot of them, their goal is to finish. And to finish and to have the words "you are an Ironman" told, like said to them when they cross the finish line, means the world. That is the culmination of potentially years or decades of work to get to that point. And I think like the least that I can do is honor them and show my respect to them by finishing the race, even if that means walking. And so sometimes what you have to do is like as a pro, things aren't going well. You can just tell yourself like, you know, I'm going to get across the finish line, whatever it takes. And if that means that I have to walk the marathon, I'll walk the marathon. I've never had to walk the marathon, but it's like, I think just knowing that you can have like a semi out can be valuable. And then in reality, you just don't let yourself have that semi out.
That's a great way to look at it. And I couldn't agree more with just self-talk and telling yourself that this is nothing that someone hasn't done before, right?
Hmm.
Like you're doing these triathlons, and when you hit the wall, I mean, people have done triathlons before. There's no reason why you can't finish.
Right.
And I think that's a great way to look at it. What is a common myth about people who pursue extreme goals like yourself that you'd like to debunk? Is there something that you hear people say that you're like, that's actually not true?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is that like, that you can't necessarily have a life, or you can't necessarily have relationships. I certainly think that relationships can suffer if you're not intentional about it. But like, with my significant other, we got together basically when I started triathlon, and so I've been very intentional throughout our relationship to make sure that I give her enough time and give her sufficient time. And, there are certainly times where I don't do the best at it, but then we're able to talk it out, and then I make changes and we improve. And so I think that's kind of probably the biggest thing is like, that that like you're fully selfish on yourself. And obviously there's a fair degree of selfishness that comes with this when you're working out for 4 hours a day, but also at the same time, like I try and be very, very intentional to give my time to others and to help others in different capacities, and to be there for other people. So,
Looking ahead, because right now you're just in your peak, you're, professional triathlete, medical student. We talked earlier, your goals are to do ENT, skull base, head and neck surgery, unbelievable aspirations. What do you see your future being both in medicine and professional sports?
yeah, so I think the harder question is in professional sports because, um, I'm a little bit in uncharted territory in that. it's not really clear exactly how long I can do this. And I want to do it as long as I can. But at the end of the day, like patient care is always going to come first. And so there's going to be a point where I make a decision of like, hey, I feel like I'm sacrificing my training as in medicine or the care of my patients because I'm doing this other thing, and I'm then going to have to pull it back. Um, but I don't know exactly when that's going to be. Like starting clinical rotations was one of those kind of we'll call it a gateway where I was like, I don't know if I can do this. Like this is a big unknown. I don't know if I can do both at a high level, and was able to figure it out. Um, and so there's going to be more of those in the future. And at one of those points, it's going to be like, okay, this is too much. I need to just focus on medicine. And so that's kind of the harder question. And then from a medical side of things, like as I said, I want to do ENT for residency, and then do either like head and neck cancer or skull base, or maybe a combination. I think there's certainly a possibility where I do two different fellowships, so that I can kind of do both. But that's kind of a long ways to figure out. And then longer term, like um, obviously operate, and that's going to be the primary bulk of my job. But I also think I'm very into research. I love asking questions. I'm very curious, and so I'd love to come up with a situation where I don't necessarily have a basic science lab. That's not. I'm more interested in the translational or kind of the application type research. Um, and kind of being able to devote a day, maybe 2 days a week, onto that, I think is something that I would like to do longer term.
Unbelievable answer. Last question, because I know you either have rounds or some crazy extreme endurance activity to get to, but what legacy do you hope to leave? And not just as a triathlete, not just as a doctor, but someone who embraced two incredibly ambitious opportunities and excelled at both.
Yeah, so I mean, I think the inspiration is twofold, and the easiest one is to be a role model and an inspiration to others, and showing like, hey, you can do these things that you might think you can't do. And then also, from a cancer side of things, like my real goal is to use sport and to use kind of the quote unquote platform that I now have as a way to make a positive impact in the world. And maybe that means saving like a life or two because someone realizes it, like, hey, this lump on my neck, or like this one thing, I should go get it checked out. um and but I may never directly know if I've made that impact or not, um but those are kind of the two things that I hope to leave on people. And then obviously the impact that you have on patients when I ultimately get to that point, is another big thing. So
Matthew, unbelievable interview. I think a couple take home points that I want to hammer home with all of our listeners. And number one is your ambition, your discipline, your drive, your focus. Anyone who says, oh, I don't have time for this, I don't have time for that, oh, I'm so tired, everyone comes up with excuses. I would urge everyone to listen to you, to your goals, and realize that that's all BS. And at the end of the day, if you want something bad enough and if it's important, you can get it done and you can always fit it in. And your mentality of no excuses. I made a commitment. I'm not going to change my mind. And once you commit to something, you stick with it because it's so easy when that alarm goes off being like, I'm not going to work out today. I'm going to sleep in a little bit longer. And the ability to push through is truly incredible. The other thing is your dedication to medicine and fitness and how they both play in. And you said it best that one of the best predictors of success in medicine is being elite in something else. And as a program director, when we select residents from our program, we get obviously the best medical students from around the country. I agree with you 1000%. I look for excellence in something else, whether it's Division One athletics, whether you're an incredible painter, whether you do the arts, whether you have an MBA or a PhD and you've done something else that is different at an incredibly high level. I think that is a just an incredible predictor of success in medicine. So kudos to you. And as we talked about, I know you're going to do ENT. If you ever want to switch to neurosurgery, you let me know. We would love to get you into neurosurgery here. And again, thanks for your time, man. Really inspirational.
thank you. Really appreciate being on and talking to you.
All right, buddy. Have a great day, man.
Thank you. You too.